I have certainly watched worse, and bad Trek can still be good sometimes, but
I don't know. I don't think this
Right.
is like either good or bad. It's just material for like cutting like a ASMR tape of like sound like Nimoy is fucking you.
Well, when we start when you start recording for the thing, let's all be quiet for like 5 seconds, and then Idle just goes quiet.
oh, I thought we were recording.
Quiet! Okay, welcome everyone to Star Trek, our continuing voyage through the episodes of Star Trek. We are now on to the TAS episode, One of Our Planets is Missing. This episode, a very short little fun adventure that seems to have inspired a lot of episodes that come after it now. This was written by Mark Daniels. This is his only writing credit for all of Star Trek. However, he has directed a lot of episodes, including The Man Trap, Court Martial, The Menagerie, Space Seed, The Doomsday Machine, which he said was a direct inspiration for writing this episode, and Spock's Brain. So take from that what you will.
He's definitely a better director than writer, I would say.
Yeah. So, we follow the Enterprise as it encounters a being or a cloud willing to destroy and consume planets. As they, I think the actual plot of this episode isn't the problem because the plot is fairly standard. Yeah, it's a fairly standard Star Trek plot. Yeah. It's everything around it that's just hilarious.
And not quite for the right reasons. This isn't hilarious in the way that Trouble with Tribbles is hilarious. This is, wow, that sure is a lot of like close-ups of Kirk's face and a lot of Kirk and like McCoy just kind of staring at each other while Spock goes.
Yes, the Spock, reaching out to the villi with his mind and announcing that he will be inside you is I think if you have a chance to watch the watch along, we were just we're just cracking up throughout the entire like last 10 minutes of this episode. So this, as I said, Mark Daniels, who wrote this episode, was inspired by the Doomsday Machine. You can see like an otherworldly terror coming to ravage its way across the galaxy. However, I think they kind of try and the whole.
Yeah, no. So it also comes from outside the galaxy, which I believe is also the origin of the Doomsday Machine.
Yeah,
I think Spock says that it came from outside our galaxy. This is just a repeat, except that they cut half of the motion picture in there instead.
Yeah, and we see the return of not anymore Commodore Bob Wesley, who was previously in the TOS episode The Ultimate Computer as Commodore Wesley, commander of the USS Lexington. However, not voiced by the original actor. It was, in fact, bonus points, who voiced Commodore Wesley?
Scotty.
Everyone he voices.
Now he commands a colony at the edge of galaxy.
Absolutely.
The furthest away Federation planet.
It was actually a really good episode, too. The M5 computer... You get, like, finally a black person on TV, and he's not a total schmuck. He's, like, a huge genius. I love the portrayal of, mental illness drifting into insanity there. And then, Bob plays a great part there because his intuition is what saves the Enterprise from being destroyed. He trusts Jim Kirk at the end, and that ends up being the right thing. So... Anyway,
and Wesley showed all
better than this one,
and heroic quality and that energy in this episode where he sat on a computer monitor and very quietly took a lot of sleeping pills and Quaaludes and waited to die.
Look, you're going to be old one day.
He's sounding bored.
Kirk asks, "Where's your daughter?"
Understand it.
Yes.
He's like, "Oh, she's dead right here next to me."
They're all dead.
Yeah.
They're all dead, Jim. Everybody's dead.
Playing with the Lego. She doesn't understand.
Oh yeah, a lot of the impedance for this episode was going through the inside of the cloud, which was then revealed to be a creature, and trying to work out what exactly it was, which kind of reminded me of, and I think we said it during the watch along, like A Fantastic Journey, or you start to reveal that this is a creature, or a lot of other Trek tropes in this, like there's the motion picture cribs, some from this, definitely a lot of other Star Trek, or
what's the episode where the Enterprise goes inside the giant amoeba? Is that
Operation Annihilate?
No, that's the one with the stupid flying pancakes. It's the one with the giant amoeba that killed the Intrepid.
Oh, the immunity syndrome?
That's the
Yeah,
one.
that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also very like
Yeah.
It's Mad Libs with Star Trek prompts. Like it's very very stock. This plot.
It's a 30-minute animated colonoscopy.
Essentially, yes. The thing
We
that got
just
me.
watched a health procedure.
Yeah.
No, it's the Magic School Bus for adults.
Yeah.
Is it for adults? I don't know.
Well, there was a lot of technobabble. Like there was if my children were watching this, they'd have phased out long ago. They'd be like, what's going on?
And it's so weird because they started with this really dense technobabble, like using words that they obviously looked up in a thesaurus, and then the last third is just like everyone is on something in the writer's room, and they completely skip any semblance of science, and they start doing like mind touches and stuff. So it's kind of weird that they go from one extreme to the other.
For the first half of the episode, the writer was clearly being paid for like every time I have to look in a thesaurus mark to make sure that this is a real word, I pay you $5. And then halfway through, he realized that was a bad decision. He's like, Mark, I'm not going to give you I'll give you $5 if you cut it down to like monosyllabic words, and then that's why we get the no comprehend, no kill. It's a very Horta-esque.
No kill eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's literally no kill eye conversation going on, and it's like these are the extremes of this episode, and it just. I have to admit, it's not.
It's
you know
because
what?
their science consultant is the Native American consultant on Voyager. And that's
He's lived a long life.
So, you know what I just kind of realized? So, this is a really stock Star Trek setup, right? Of like, oh, there's this giant thing that's incomprehensible, and as we get it further into it, we understand more about it, and it has some degree of an intelligence. We have to deal with it in some way. And I just kind of realized a lot of these Star Trek trope episodes, like if they're played very, very like straight, and they don't have a lot of character moments, you tend not to care or remember them. They just kind of blend into the melange of that trope episode of like, this has happened a lot, it'll happen again. And I think of all the ones that I enjoy, like say Cause and Effect, and the reason why Cause and Effect is good and why it matters is because it's directed well, and there's a lot of really good character moments and a lot of good character work being done in that episode, where it's very different from the rest of the series, actually, where it's like focused on Beverly, and you get a lot more of these different perspectives, and there's a lot of interesting directorial choices. So, like, an episode like this kind of lives and breathes based on how interesting you're dealing with the characters and how much you're doing to vary things up. And on that front, this episode completely failed because it's literally just everyone on the bridge just kind of going...
And I think that's common with Taz. I think we had the Outsider episode with Yesteryear, which was very much a more personal story with Spock. But I think generally with the 22-minute or 20-minute time frame that they're allotted to, there's a lot more impetus on let's go and explore the strange and unknown rather than focus on the character dynamic. I think there may be a little pieces come out. I think we get a Spock McCoy argument at some point. But yeah, they are very much there playing their roles for what you would expect in a follow-up. But I imagine if it was a 40-minute episode, yeah, you probably would get a little bit more of that, but hey-ho.
It's been whiplash so far because the pilot was much like this, where it's still too much plot. And then Yesteryear is the only plot is go back in time and like your dog dies. That's the whole plot. But then they spend the rest of the time exploring his family and relationships and stuff. So to go from one extreme to the other and then back again is like this show doesn't quite know what it's about yet, I think.
Yeah, it hasn't learned how to strike that balance just yet, and God knows if it even will, because, like, I don't know, I feel like it's really important, especially in a cartoon, to have a lot of characters with personality, because, like, I know that, like, we are long past the point where animation is considered for kids, you know, it's like, this is an animated series, I guess adults would watch this because they like Star Trek, right? But, like, you need character. You need, like, big emotional moments, you need a little bit of action, you need a little bit of everything on the seasoning and the pie, right? You don't want dry recitation of talk to me about the villi and the all these weird terms, like you have to like these are all $1 million words in Scrabble, but like I don't really think a kid is going to give a single shit. They want to see like the pointy-eared man argue with a southern man. They want to see that. I want to see that.
I wonder if go on, sorry, go on, Frank.
I was going to say I can just picture Bill Shatner walking into the sound booth to record his lines, opening up the envelope of cash they gave him and counting it, going, it's a little light this week. Okay, well, I'm going to give half-ass.
Yeah.
And he kind of, it wasn't full Shatner. Like, there was a little bit of emotion in the lines. Sulu did good with his lines, who are ahead 2 words, I think.
Mhm.
Scotty always, Jimmy Doohan does everybody, so he's fine. But yeah, and in the animation, we left the bridge twice. Once to go to the quarters and once to go to engineering.
Yeah, we had that expanded sort of like nacelle engineering zappy point, which was quite interesting. I was like, oh, where are we?
It's meant to be inside the nacelle. I think that's what the implication was, but it's not quite clear.
It's powered by antimatter and matter. That was it. The separate matter and antimatter engines colliding, which was you know.
You mean a warp core?
A warp core. Who'd have thunk? Had they defined it as a warp core? Then they must have, I suppose.
Pretty sure they must have called. Well, they're moving at warp speed, right?
Yeah, that's
they
true.
Say that at the front of the episode. Yeah, it's just a bit odd. I feel like it's very. I also feel like it really hurts the stakes of the episode when you have this threat of, oh man, Mantilles will die, 82 million people. The only thing you see of that entire planet is one guy on a monitor twice. You don't get
you do get the shot of the kids playing in the fountain and the families running through the park.
That's archive footage. That's archive footage.
Is it? Oh, okay. I thought
Yeah, like that's not even Mantilles. You don't even so like
was
the
that
entire
Alondra?
point is like, yeah, pretty much. And it's like I don't care about Mantilles. It's just a name. It's just a word. It doesn't exist because you haven't. But if you had shown me even just like a perfunctory shot of like a load of shadowy people, like as like this giant death cloud is approaching, and like kids are clinging to their parents' legs, and they're like, "What's happening, Daddy?" Lean into it. Guess what? Kids respond really well to that kind of stuff, actually, and it makes it more memorable and increases the stakes. Whereas here it was like, I have no particular strong feelings as to whether or not this planet dies or not. It could care. I could care. I couldn't.
There's no excuse not to do it because there's no cost for sets or extras or anything like that. You just draw it. So they could have definitely added some.
I'd imagine this kind of reminds me of sort of like The Simpsons when they say, "Oh, have you tried to do Itchy and Scratchy live?" It's like, well, it's a terrible strain on the animator's wrist. I think half of this is probably being done live, like Kumaki Shadow puppets or something like that. It's like every now and then we've got the frame for them running, we've got the frame for the real close up of Kirk's face for some reason, which is bizarre.
And the same shot of Eric's every time.
Yes, Captain. That's a good Eric's. You should. Yeah.
Eric's with his very kissable lips.
Yeah, why? You came up with that in the watch along, and I'm like, what? That third arm's really doing it for you, isn't it?
Hey, man.
All right, let me bust out some of this technobabble. And as I'm looking at the script now, this is such a perfect encapsulation of Spock and Kirk. Spock says the streamers are a combination of Koino energy, almost an ambiplasma, with an unusually powerful attractive force. And immediately after, Kirk says, prepare to fire all phasers into cloud mass. So it's like Spock is giving us the science background.
Can I have a milkshake?
New life. And Kirk is just like, kill it immediately. So
can I have a milkshake with a Kino ambiplasmic frosting? Thank you.
I have my ambiplasma right here. Thank you.
Tasty ambiplasma. So yeah, and then the other was Spock's mind meld was something else. Or sorry, not mind meld, mind touch.
Mind touch.
Despite the fact he couldn't touch her or touch.
Mind fondle.
Mind fondle. And it did get quite inappropriate as he spreads his arms and goes, "I am inside you."
Over the clothes
Very
petting.
small.
Yeah, and after the script came in, like Roddenberry went over to Major and was like, "Hey, can you read these lines?" And she was half asleep at the time, so she's like, "Yeah, sure, no comprehend." And I don't blame her. Like without emotional context and an actual character, it's hard to give these kind of lines any gravitas. But it just made it hilarious, really, rather than a feeling of touching something alien. It was just like, "Hey, don't do that, okay?"
All right.
And so
yeah.
I did like the first third of the episode, especially, other than it being a little bit too dense on script, because I'll go back to again, it was a Magic School Bus, and even though they weren't catering to kids necessarily, they could have very easily. You get the dialogue from Bones where he's like, now we're in the intestine, and like they're explaining as they go what it's like to explore an organism. And so if you put that on, Saturday morning for kids, they'd think it's cool because it's in space and lasers and stuff, and everyone knew Captain Kirk. But you could also do some education there, and I almost kind of wish they had stuck with more of a kids program instead of whatever fever dream it kind of ended up being.
I mean, yeah, like for the start, you're like, oh, actual sciencey terms in Star Trek, that's kind of rare. I'm so used to them being completely made up bullshit like warp particles. Like, it's kind of nice to see a word and be like, oh, I don't know what that word means, and you probably can look it up, and if this is actually probably a real word. And then it became very, 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 very much too much. Like, if you hadn't told me that this guy actually did directorial work, I'd be like, is this guy like the scientific advisor who just got allowed to write script?
Okay,
you gotta lower the tone a bit.
Let's mix it up a little bit. What would you change? I feel like we haven't done this for a while. What would you change? Frank, what would you change about this episode?
So I agree. I would add more stakes to it. Not that 82 million people on a planet is not stakes, but I would make you feel something about them. I would introduce them to you, show that planet, get off the bridge, and give us some implications as to what's going to happen, and the maybe even just like floating through space to go to see Bob pass a planet that had been enveloped or eaten or something else, and you go, oh my God, what happened there? And see, there's this path of destruction before you, and that raises the stakes to let you know, oh, this is then going to happen. Little things like that, because everything else, if you're trying to make it for children, it's kind of already sort of there, but it could be kind of scary. But for a Star Trek show, that's all you need. And then it could be an actual 40-something minute episode. Just a little tweak.
How about you, Otto? What would you change?
A lot. So this is more like number 7 or 8 on the list of things I'd change, but it just occurred to me, so let's explore it. The Voyager episode, The Cloud, is basically the same thing, where they're running low on energy reserves. Janeway goes, there's coffee in that nebula, and they go in, and they end up getting stuck. And then, they consult the EMH. We blew a hole in its side. How do we treat it? And they do a suture. Like, they explore things in a very grounded way that people watching it can understand. So they set up all this stuff now in the TAS episode with science and technobabble and real life babble terms, and then they just go off the deep end with fixing it with a mind touch. I wish they would have gone like some other way to communicate with the creature, or something other than hand wave it like Jedi. What is it, midichlorians, to fix the answer, which is kind of what the Vulcan mind meld is a lot of times. So I wish they kind of would have stayed grounded in the science theme.
Stars.
Yeah, I feel like half the time when you have to resort to, Spock develops a new power to solve the problem, which this kind of was, because he's a touch telepath. He can sometimes come.
He has shown like non-touch senses before, hasn't he? In TOS.
But by this, he had that weird thing where he hypnotized people. But it's like it's this thing where, like, the moment you start creeping the power so that he can handle the problem, it's like you're basically admitting that you've written yourself into a corner.
Yeah, and that's it.
It would have been nice to just, instead of having Spock, because guess what? I bet you if you break this down line by line, Spock is like 80% of the actual like content of this episode, because there's a lot of exposition, there's a lot of science like stuff going on here. Would it not have been novel to have Uhura go, hey, I think I can crack this using the lingo code, and then she's the one who does it? Guess what? You've got Nichelle Nichols in the fucking recording studio. I'm sure she's doing the other half of the voices. What's wrong with that? Like, just to bury it up, that would have been something, and you could have come at it from her perspective of a bit more warmth and talking to this being, whereas Spock is just very, as is his way, logical and cold and just kind of direct. And it's like, I guess it works because the Cloud is kind of portrayed as being this like sort of like childlike entity. It doesn't quite understand that what it's doing is, quote unquote wrong. But for Uhura to have come at it, I would have like much more preferred that kind of character bend to it. That would have been a really welcome shot of human character and warmth and like actual bridging of the gap. Whereas Spock basically says, "Don't do that. Now fuck off." And the Cloud just does it.
It does, doesn't it?
I don't feel like we learned anything really about like the greater, wider unknown. We just solved the problem and then we left. Whereas if it had been Uhura, it would have been this feeling of, this could grow into something. Maybe we could talk to that thing in the future. Maybe it will be some kind of advancement that we can go back to. Whereas with Spock, because of his naturally emotionless state, he doesn't respond to it in that way, and that's not as interesting for a viewer to respond to.
I kind of would love a follow-up to this episode, I think. But yeah, sorry, we'll go on.
He does try to humanize things, which is always the Trek trope, is like humanity is the pinnacle. So he humanizes what the Cloud is about to do, and then the Cloud understands it. So it's not total nonsense, but yeah, the fact that you can just like do it from a seated position with your arms out kind of kills the magic of Trek.
What about you, Idle?
I'd have probably taken out the whole kind of engineering, or at least like the threat of the ship running out of power, because that felt like
there's not much to take out, by the way.
It was pointless, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was pointless because there was already the timed stake of them reaching Mantilles. Then this was just another little bit. Like in a 20-minute episode, they could have taken that out and used that time to, say, explore Mantilles, talk about the planet, and maybe visit and sin what the stakes were, and sort of escalate the threat, and maybe establish that this creature was a bit more sentient, and put a bit more time into that rather than. I think they spent about a good 5 minutes, and this whole sequence like rigging up some antimatter into the core so they could last a little bit longer. I think that probably could have been tweaked a bit,
or cut entirely. Yeah,
or cut and cut. Yeah, definitely. But then you'd robbed us of some James Doohan, so well, there you are.
You could have had Scotty do something else.
You could have, yeah.
It's that easy.
Shall I try blowing it up, sir?
All right, Simon Pegg, calm it down.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, let's go. Stars, give us a wonderful metric in which
we don't get to do a best worst.
Do you want to do best worst? I figured.
Is there enough here?
Well, this is what I wondered.
Best or worst.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. Right, let's start with you, Otto, then, since you suggested best or worst moment.
I love the schmaltz of we're the good guys usually. So, the Kirk line, am I doing the right thing, Bones? Once I said that man rose above primitiveness by vowing, I will not kill today. And so that's, that's good. It's a nice departure from the 8-syllable stuff that Spock was fighting before. And they did do their best, like to the point of idiocy, putting 11 million lives on the line instead of killing the one. So, like, it does tie in. But I like the cheesy, the real moral, we're the good guys type stuff. So I like that line.
Frank.
Well, Otto just kind of stole mine, so I was going to go just a slight tweak on it of without question, Kirk just says, we're going to blow ourselves up, and nobody else questions it. It's just like, yep, sure. That's Scotty's like, you bet. I'll start turning the keys, and we'll be dead in 5 minutes.
Scotty just couldn't wait. He's like, yes.
I want to die shiny and chrome.
I really can't stand this mustache motherfucker in engineering with me, and I'm ready for him to go.
He's gonna get atomized. He doesn't know. It's gonna be great.
Now I want to see like millennial Star Trek where everyone's depressed and they want to kill themselves in every episode.
With the enthusiasm of Shax wanting to, blow up or eject the warp core, yeah. All right, how about you, Stars?
Oh God. I'll be kind and I'll say there were some really nice shots in here of like the cloud enveloping the Enterprise and like stuff that you actually have to have paid a little bit of money to actually animate that, because I don't imagine that they were standard frames that TAS had, which is so often the problem. Like it did at least look good. It didn't look as cheap as I'm used to TAS looking. I was like, some of these had like a little bit of a bit more of a visual flair to it, maybe because this guy had previously had directorial experience on Trek, so he had a bit more of an idea of how he wanted things to look and expressing that. But yeah, I thought that was novel. It was nice to see that.
I'm gonna throw out worst moment in just the overall voice acting was kind of everyone felt bored. Like they didn't kind of get anything. Yeah. Even McCoy, who was not his usual hyper-excited self when he's got a chance to sort of stick it to Spock, was just kind of like, well,
he should be more grouchy.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's going on? You know, the whole conversation between him and McCoy, there should have been a whole dilemma of, like, him taking it to Kirk to say, like, you can't kill a being at the expense of others, and him saying, what choice do I have, Bones? You know, there could have been a bit moment there. But, yeah, it just felt like that everyone was just like, we're here, let's talk, and it's time for lunch. Who wants to go to the bar? Fantastic. Okay, Stars, give me a lovely, fantastic rating metric that we will be going out of 10 for.
Gentlemen, how many throbbing, veiny villi would you all give this episode out of 10?
Vascular, veiny villi.
Vascular, veiny.
The 3 Vs.
Yeah, go get that alliteration.
Get your 3 Vs a day. Auto.
Put me last.
Okay, Stars.
I'd have to give this like a 4 out of 10. Like,
Okay.
like 4 throbbing, vascular, veiny out of 10. Villi out of 10. It's just not a lot here. It's so curiously emotionless for something that should have stakes to it. Like the Doomsday Machine does this so much better because it epitomizes the struggle and what they stand to lose through Decker and his hysteria, and you get the awesome shots of the Constitution just being absolutely wrecked, and you know all the planets that they've seen just being like completely atomized. It's like it builds up the stakes and it feels very much like anything could happen, anyone could die. You know, maybe. You know, like something could happen. You know, it feels like that. Here, there is absolutely no illusion of stake, and it's just it's a thought exercise more than anything else. It just feels so sterile that, like, yeah, I can't vibe with it. 4 out of 10.
Frank.
Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, does part of this so much better because you get a unexplained being from another galaxy that's going to kill everybody until you find a way to communicate with it and tell it, no, don't. And the stakes were explained and everything was, so 4 will play into my rating here, but not to steal your Thunderstars. I'm going to do a 4.20 out of 10 veiny, throbbing, vascular villi, because I would have to be high as shit to watch this again and probably see it differently.
In 2070, when we come around to do these all again, I'll make sure we've all got edibles.
Why wait that long?
Auto.
It's so hard to do these like in a vacuum because there's 1,000 episodes, and if you watched it on a different day, you'd give a different answer. Keep hammering in hot. It's got to be 5, right on the nose. 5. They did a whole lot of good stuff to set it up, especially the first third. You're like, all right, this could be like a great kind of Star Trek theme educational show. They had some good moral dilemma dialogue in there, and they like in the original series, you never see them like in a nebula. Like you see them inside a giant amoeba or whatever, but it's just the Enterprise overlaid on the. There's no sense of depth. There's no 3D. They didn't have the technology at the time. Here they did a lot more with exploring what they could do with animation. And then there's like a downside to all that where, like Star said, they didn't actually show the planet in danger, even though they very could have easily with animation. The dialogue was too dense at some points. So they had a lot of good stuff and a lot of bad stuff. And even though it was a terrible episode, we had a fun time watching it and laughed a lot. So it's like there's so much on either side. I just have to split it right down the middle with a 5.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think I'm with a 5. I enjoyed watching this more than I thought. Like there were some flaws. It was, you know, the voice acting was bland. The plot got a little incoherent, and the pacing was all over the place. But I enjoyed watching it. It was a classic Trek trope, and I appreciated it for that. I enjoyed them going inside the belly of the beast, which is always a fun motion picturesque kind of. You know, obviously was influenced by this, and yeah, it was. I was enjoyed, but I know what's not giving me it more. Sorry, what's not me giving it more is just the fact that it went batshit bananas in the second half. as soon as Spock spread his arms, we lost the plot.
I'm sorry, Idlin, I meant to say 5 vascular veiny villi.
Indeed, I also repeat that statement.
The system.
Indeed. Okay, well that brings us to a lovely average of a 4.6, which is, you know, that's, you know, straddling just under the middle, just like Arex does. And with that, we'll see you in a couple of weeks for the next Trek, which will be Deep Space Nine's A Man Alone. Live logs and proper. Ta-ra!